right, O1, rational functions. This is pronounced asymptote and excluded values. What an asymptote is, it's an imaginary line that the graph won't cross. An imaginary line where the graph doesn't cross. And we're going to be talking about horizontal and vertical asymptotes in this lesson. Remember, vertical goes up and down, and horizontal goes left and right. It's very important whenever it says what is the equation that you have to either use x equals or y equals depending on one or the other. So on this it says vertical asymptote. Vertical goes up and down. This yellow line is imaginary, and what happens is this graph from the right going to left, it's getting closer and closer and closer to that yellow line, but it's never going to cross it. Same thing from the left. If it's coming here, it's getting closer and closer and closer to that yellow line, but it's never going to cross it. What is the yellow line? So what axis does it cross? It crosses the x-axis. Where does it cross? At -6. This right here is -6. So the equation of the vertical asymptote is -6. Okay, horizontal asymptote. Horizontal goes left and right. So look at the blue lines, blue curves, and see where they're never going to cross, and it's this green line right there. It's getting closer and closer and closer to the green line. It's going to go down, 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 but it's never going to get there. And this one right here is getting closer and closer and closer, but it never gets there. So what is the equation of that green line? Well, on this one, it crosses the y-axis. We're at 0 right there. Okay, so vertical asymptote is always going to be x equals. Horizontal asymptote is always going to be y equals, and depending on what the number is. Okay, and then if it says the excluded value, it's always talking about the vertical asymptote or the x value that is never going to be used by the graph. But whenever it says excluded value, you're not going to put x equals, you're just going to put the number. So the horizontal asymptote is x equals 0 right here, but we are just going to put 0. You're never going to be able, if we had the equation of this graph, we would never be able to put 0 into the equation and be able to get an answer. Look at the graph. What are the equations of the horizontal and vertical asymptotes? So horizontal, remember, is y equals, and vertical is x equals. So don't put the zeros because I haven't even looked at the graph yet. Y equals and x equals. So let's see. Let's find our imaginary borders. See right there? Where is this? This is at -1, -3. Do you understand that? Where those two highlighted blue lines cross was at -1, -3. Well, that's your x and that's your y. So -1 and -3 is what you would put. Okay. On these, let me give you a little bit of a background for it. We have, this is just y equals 1, I'm going to put a, over x minus h plus k. All right. On these type of questions, the horizontal asymptote is going to be your k. It is going to be wherever your k is to the outside of that fraction. You're not going to change the sign. You're not going to do anything, but you're just going to look at it. And right there, our k is 6. So our answer would be 6. Now, I'm going to skip the next one for just a second and go down to here, and then I'm going to go back up there. Let's write that again. So y equals a over x minus h plus k. So your k is your horizontal asymptote. Your h is your vertical asymptote. And we're not even going to talk about a. All right? So when it asks for the excluded value, it's asking for your x. It's like, what number, if we put it into this equation, would we not be able to do the problem? And in this case, our excluded value is 8, because if we put 8 into x, 8 minus 8 is 0, which puts a 0 on bottom, and we can't ever do that. So your excluded value is the vertical asymptote, and the vertical asymptote is basically what makes the bottom 0. Okay, so on this one, excluded value, so what makes this 0? Well, let me go back up here. So what makes it 0? Plus 8, x equals 8, so it can't be 8. So on this one, 6x minus 3 equals 0. We add the 3, we divide by 6, and it's 1/2. If you put 1/2 into x into the equation, you would get 0 on bottom, and that is unacceptable. So that's how you're going to get the excluded values. Now let's go back up here, the one that I skipped. Okay, so your horizontal asymptote is going to be your k. Your vertical asymptote is going to be your h. Your k would be like a plus 0 because there's not a plus or a minus anything right there. So it's going to be y equals 0. Vertical asymptote is going to be x equals. What makes this 0? 4 makes that 0, so your vertical asymptote would be x equals 4.